Good morning, Christian Hilly here from Kordia. Just give you a short presentation on who Kordia are and the services we provide, radio and other, in this region. Thank you. I guess as a commercial organisation, I'm just going to take a couple of moments to say this is who we are and what we do outside of the marine safety communications as well. So Kordia has one shareholder. It's New Zealand government, 100% owned by New Zealand government. Any money that we make here on providing services on behalf of Australians goes back to New Zealand. It delivers broadcast services, technology, business critical, safety of life and cybersecurity services across Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific. Importantly, for mariners, especially using our HF radio, we provide radio services, as it says there, quarter of the world's oceans. So if you're offshore and you're somewhere east of Africa and west of South America and you're using HF, it's likely you'll be talking to one of our operators either in Canberra or in Wellington in New Zealand. To some of the government agencies that we work to, providing radio services, vessel tracking, intelligence and what would you say, safety of life services in the region. If you get into trouble when you're at sea and you activate one of those, the receiving station, as you can see there, that's in Western Australia. That was built by Kordia engineers, and that signal now will go through the AMSA office in Canberra, and it'll be monitored by Kordia staff. Importantly for you guys going offshore in this region using HF radio, the two sites that you are most likely to call to are going to be Wiluna in Western Australia and Charleville in Queensland. Everybody familiar with those sites? On behalf of the Northern Territory, Queensland, New South Wales, Victorian and South Australian governments, we monitor those frequencies, 4, 6, 8, 12 distress and calling frequencies 24/7. So if you're off the coast, you should be calling them to test your radio because you don't want to be testing them at the time you're getting into trouble. So those guys, they're actually paid to take your call, and if you're not calling them, they're not doing much. So I'd recommend that if you've got a radio, just going off the coast here, then you should be testing it out. I can give you some advice on frequencies that you should be using. If you're in the middle of the day and you're off the coast here in New South Wales, you shouldn't be on anything less than 8 megahertz. Into the evening and overnight, then you can try something lower. But as I said, if you are out there, then you should be calling them, and then you'll be familiar with the voices that are on the other end of the radio and the best frequencies for your position. Any questions on that? Using the same sites, so that was Charleville and Wiluna radios. Using the same sites, Kordia contracts to AMSA to provide the HF services for soulless vessels. So there's a continuous DSC watch, and the procedure there, if you're not familiar, is that all radio calls will be preceded by a DC message which effectively says, "This is me and I'd like to talk to you." And at that point, one of our operators would listen to the radio. Fortunately, they're already listening because they're doing it on behalf of New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, Northern Territory, South Australia. In addition to those HF services, Kordia provides the VHF monitoring for the Victorian coast. That's a Kordia designed, built and operated network, and if you're in Bass Strait, I guess if you're in the Hobart race going south and you can't get to marine rescue from the Eden site, then you may speak to one of the radio operators on the Victorian coast. This one is just for information. There's a current consultation requested by AMSA on behalf of all Australian states in the Northern Territory that HF 24/7 monitoring would cease on the 1st of January 2022. They're asking for feedback for those people who do use it. At the moment, I guess they're suggesting that the use of HF radio is declining and that there would not be a requirement for that service post the 1st of January 2022. And if you did need to use HF service, then you should install a DSC radio. Questions? That's it. Thanks.
Well, it's very interesting about radios. So our next presenter from AMSA is Cindy Francis. I have given you her preview of her position, and with no further ado, Cindy.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out in such numbers on a Sunday morning. I know if you're like me, you weren't quite so keen on getting out of bed to be here, but I thank you for the effort. So, my background, I've been working in the Australian Maritime Safety Authority's Rescue Coordination Centre now for 16 years. We're also known as JRCC Australia, so we're the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre. Hoping this works. Excellent. So today I'm going to be talking about where we fit into the SAR organisations within Australia, what we actually provide, and what we can do to assist you. So we're one of the Commonwealth Government agencies that are actually set up to help. We are there 24 hours a day, and we are there to help. So, how we exist. Australia's signed up to ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organisation. We're signatories to IMO, the International Maritime Organisation, and we're also signatories to SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea. So as part of our commitments to those agreements, we have a Joint Rescue Coordination Centre in Canberra, there to provide 24-hour-a-day support for people in distress. In Australia, we've set up 3 organisations that have responsibility for search and rescue. We have 3 SAR authorities. So JRCC Australia is one of them. Police, state police are a second SAR authority, and Defence is a third SAR authority in their own right. We coordinate closely together to get the job done. JRCC Australia could not do their job without the support of police or Defence, and we are there to support police and Defence in their prosecution of SAR as well. So we work hand in hand to get the job done within the Australian context. In all incidents, one of those 3 authorities will be the overall coordinator for SAR and supported by the other 2 as necessary. So, JRCC Australia, we're located in Canberra, as already said, 24 hours a day there, waiting for distress alerting. We provide maritime and aviation search and rescue, and we support the state police in any of their search and rescue activities as they request it. Primarily, we're responsible for solar shipping, civil aviation, and distress beacons, and any vessels that between us and the police we agree that we will be coordinating. Some jobs will be a JRCC coordination, other jobs will be a state police responsibility. So we provide the MEOSAR system through Kordia. We listen out for emergency beacons within the Australian area. However, anywhere in the world where an Australian beacon is activated, that alert will come to JRCC Australia. This is where your registration of beacons is vitally important, because we can provide that information to the country where you're located to assist them in providing the best response to your distress. So I know yachts travel the globe. Your Australian beacon will be picked up wherever you are in the world, and it will be sent to JRCC Australia. We also provide drift modelling, drift validation. We task search and rescue assets, we develop search areas, and we provide incident coordination, depending on where you're located and the type of distress we're responding to. Australia's area is vast. We cover 10% of the Earth's surface, 53 million square kilometres. So it's a big area. We're one of the largest in the world. The US is larger, and there are some other significant search and rescue regions, mostly around the southern hemispheres. But 10% of the Earth's surface is enough to be going on with. How the COSPAS SARSAT system works: when you activate your beacon, no matter where you are in the world, your beacon will be picked up by the satellite system. It will send the information to a local user terminal. We've already mentioned the one that we have in Minganoo in WA. We've also got the New Zealand MEOLUT that we feed into as well. So all of that information gets fed into through Kordia to JRCC Australia. The alert's processed, and depending on where the alert is in the world, it's sent to the Search and Rescue Authority responsible for that area, plus the country of registration. Hence, the Australian beacon, no matter where you are in the world, will come to us. If it's in the Australian area, so that 53 million square kilometre box, we will start coordinating a response to your distress. So, EPIRBs, ELTs and PLBs, these are all emergency beacons. Other devices such as SEND, the DeLorme SEND devices, SPOT devices, they are not beacons, but they do have a distress alerting facility in them. We have arrangements in place with the company that's responsible for those alerts, and they send those alerts directly to us. So if you send a HFDSC distress alert in the Australian area, that will come to JRCC Australia. If you send an Inmarsat-C distress alert anywhere in that 53 million square kilometre box, we will get it. If you turn on your beacon anywhere in that box, we will start responding. So it doesn't matter what distress alerting device you are using, it will eventually come to us. So once we get a distress alert, doesn't matter what type it is, we will start drift modelling. We will look at your location, we will try and determine how best to respond to your situation. Obviously, if it's a yacht, we're dealing with generally more than one person, but it could be one person. This is where your registration comes into play. I will know immediately the type of yacht you're on. I would know immediately the crewing numbers that are possible to be on board that yacht. I will also have emergency points of contact, if you filled in your registration properly, that I can go to get further information about you, who else might be on your yacht, and the situation, and any direct communications that we might have that we can contact your yacht. The thing with emergency beacons, we get a lot of false activations. That's not to say that we don't respond to every single one as if it's an actual emergency, but more than 80% of our beacon activations are accidental. It's either through the equipment not being correctly stowed, through accidental activations in rough weather, where beacons activate as designed when they get wet. A lot of them are designed to activate. So having communications with your vessels assists us in determining whether it's a real distress or not. So we can use a couple of tools. We will put in self-locating data marker buoys, which feed directly back into my operational system to tell us what the current's actually doing. We also have a tool called net water movement. Now, net water movement uses bathymetric data, current data, oceanographic data, wind data, a whole load of different feeds get put into a system, and it's a prediction tool to tell me what the water current is likely to do for a particular target type. We can then box up that area, assign it to search legs based on the target type that we're looking for, task assets to it, and each individual asset gets their own search legs, and off we go. So it's a simple process, but it takes time to develop these areas. The assets that we use to come and look for you. We have 3 Bombardier Challenger aircraft provided by Cobham. These are 3 dedicated aircraft that are contracted to the Maritime Safety Authority to provide search and rescue response. They're very capable jets. They're equipped with drop equipment. They can drop life rafts, stores, pumps, whatever the situation needs, we're able to drop that type of equipment to the distress location. So if you're in need of additional pumps because you're taking on water, your onboard pumps have failed or you're not able to keep up, we can actually drop pumps to your distress location. We've had 3 online, Cairns, Perth and Essendon. These aircraft can go 3,000 nautical miles, obviously in one direction. We want them to come back. So they're operating distances offshore of 1,500 nautical miles. Gives them a minimum time on scene, so obviously the closer you are to the coast, the longer they have over the top of the distress situation. They can also provide comms relay to us. We rely heavily on helicopters for search and rescue, twin engine helicopters to go offshore. These guys can provide top cover over the top of our search area to relay information back from those helicopters to us. Other resources that we use, ships at sea, obviously. Civil aircraft, we use police resources a lot, volunteer search and rescue organisations around the country, and defence forces. Aviation assets specifically, we've only got the 3 aircraft that are available to us 24 hours a day. The other aircraft are available to us on an availability basis. So they're not sitting there waiting for us to call them. We use civil search and rescue units, which we provide training to around the country. We provide training to them in basic oral homing for emergency beacons. We provide training to some of them in dropping equipment. And we provide search and rescue equipment to all of our tiered operators around the country. We use Coast Watch or Customs, Border Force as they're currently known. Domestic general aviation aircraft, so aircraft of opportunity, we will divert to determine what the situation is on scene. We also use defence and scheduled RPT traffic. We try and avoid the big Qantas Air Canada aircraft diversions, but they have been used for beacon incidents a long way off the coast to assist us in identifying what the actual state on scene is, so what the actual distress was related to. These are our trained aircraft around the country that we provide annual training to and equipment. So they're spread around the country, but it is a vast country. So their availability, as I said, is not guaranteed, but we do call upon them regularly to assist us with search and rescue. In the New South Wales, Tasmania context, I've kind of broken down where the rescue helicopters are located. Again, those rescue helicopters are not dedicated to AMSA or search and rescue. They're emergency services helicopters that might be engaged in other Priority 1 medical jobs. We will get them on an availability basis. Other resources, we do not have any search and rescue vessels. Not a single one. We rely on police, we rely on defence, we rely on our many volunteer organisations around the country to provide surface response. We also rely on the merchant shipping at sea to divert and either assist or stand by until an appropriate rescue asset can get to you. That's our craft tracking picture. So that's where all the ships are on any day operating around our country. Now these are all ships with craft tracking or AIS equipment fitted to them. So there are obviously other vessels around the country that we might get through emergency broadcasts. Specifically for the New South Wales Hobart kind of Tassie connection, those are the merchant vessels operating right now, or on the day that I snapshotted this particular picture. These are the ships that would have been available to me to divert if we had a distress situation that warranted investigation. None of these ships are obliged to do anything. I cannot oblige them to do anything. But under SOLAS, they have an obligation to respond to a distress situation. So we rely on that obligation to request their assistance in responding to a search and rescue activity. And just for information, we deal with about 8,000 incidents per year, and that's a random spread, although dated. It's fairly consistent that we have most of our jobs off the East Australian coast and a splattering of jobs all around our search and rescue region. So we're fairly busy on a day-to-day basis. And that's us in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And so you see we've got a lot of coverage and help that we need. Our next speaker is probably well known to a couple of people, representing the New South Wales Water Police. We're pleased to welcome Sergeant Paul Farquharson to tell you the part they play in coordinating and carrying out emergency situations. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, John. I think Cindy pretty much covered everything, so I don't need to say too much. I haven't got a presentation for you. I've done one of these before, and I found that at the end of the day, once all these people have spoken, that we do a questionnaire and a scenario-based sort of process, which I'm sure you've got things in your head which you actually physically want to know. How do I manage this? And we might be able to provide those answers to you. As John said, my name is Paul Farquharson. I've been in the Water Police for about 30 years. I'm a member on of the National Search and Rescue Council of Australia, and also instruct on the National Search and Rescue School down in Canberra for all the police around the whole of the country to attain their National Search and Rescue accreditation. Now, as Cindy alluded to, this is a search and rescue system. All these people plus others need to be involved in the process of search and rescue to make it work. If you set off your beacon and it goes to AMSA, Cindy's invariably going to ring me if it's in my region, and then I'm going to initiate a response. She'll initiate an aircraft, I'll initiate my volunteers to respond, I'll initiate a police asset to respond. There's a lot more stakeholders, and we're even including surf lifesaving into that, because we can have these coastal issues that go on, and we may need to medically evacuate you off a yacht, or we might do it by aircraft if it's feasible. It's not so easy to winch off aircraft as you might think. It's a bit of a prolonged and difficult process, as I'm sure the guys will talk about. So back to the Water Police, we have 8 sectors along the state, from Tweed Heads down to Eden. A lot of you might be familiar with the guys down at Eden. We have a 110-foot police launch, the Nemesis, and we've just taken delivery of 8 new 60-foot launches, which have a capability out to 600 nautical miles additional to the Nemesis capability of over 2,500 nautical miles range. So we've certainly got surface assets there that are available to assist you when you have an incident. Cindy spoke about coordination process. Now, the coordination process, which she spoke about with AMSA, is on a national level. We feed that national level down to a state level. The police in every state have jurisdictional responsibility for coordination of search and rescue for your recreational craft and also small fishing vessels. It's our obligation to provide that service. That means it's a free service too. So what we would do, we get the call, whether it be via radio, beacon activation from AMSA, and we'll initiate our own process. We have a search and rescue coordination centre at Balmain. All the jobs come in through there, whether you're dialing 000 as well through VKG. From there, we then initiate a process of either deploying one of our own assets, whether we engage an aircraft, a rotary asset, or whether we engage our friends at Marine Rescue or Surf Lifesaving, whoever it might be. We even use national parks. They walk the beaches for us. If a boat's submerged, someone's washed into the water. We're using these land assets as well to try and find you, to find debris. We do drift modelling, the same as what AMSA do. We collude with AMSA very, very closely in how we manage our search and rescue areas when we're looking for someone. So it's a pretty well covered and pretty cross-referenced system between the states and the national body. The national body will provide a huge amount of assets to us in an air response. I think last year alone they provided over $21 million in air assets to the state of New South Wales for maritime searching only. It was in that sort of figure. And I know in New South Wales last year we did over 4,500 responses to a search and rescue incident in the state, of which 65% of those were attended to by Marine Rescue New South Wales. So our volunteers play a huge role in this process as well, yet they're still just a part and one of those stakeholders that we deal with when we're conducting the SAR response. How many are in the Hobart race this year? Is many here? Okay, there's a few here. Okay, last week we had the Cabbage Tree Island race. We had 2 beacon activations. The new AIS PLBs go off. Neither of them were registered. None of them. We went straight to AMSA. They couldn't tell us. We knew they were going off and didn't have a clue who owned them. Okay, it's a big problem. Even if it's your own personal one, you're not obliged to carry, but you need to register them to the yacht that you're on. Look, I don't want to go into it too much. I think you're going to get more out of talking about scenarios. What if my crewman breaks their leg? How do we manage that? What if I've got an unconscious patient on board the boat? How are we going to get them off? Do we need to get them off? It's all circumstantial. How far offshore are you? What's the weather conditions like? We're dismasted and we've punched a hole in our yacht. What are we going to do? How are you going to manage that emergency? And I think that's probably the best way that you're going to learn something and get something out of today. In saying that, as long as you have your communications devices on board, your beacons on board, you use that communications device. If you go to Marine Rescue or anyone in the state, you're going to get to us. Okay, we have our own internal processes in place to make the system work. And that's why it's called a search and rescue system. We all play in the same field and we all understand what each other does to make it work and to come out and save lives. All right. So I think I'll leave it at that and just let's look at some scenarios. So please think of a couple in your head about what you might have concerns on about your yacht or your vessel, whatever you're on, when you're offshore. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And as you can see, we've got a few things in store for you. Now, representing Marine Rescue New South Wales, we have Glenn Evans. Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, John, and certainly thank you to everyone coming here today. It's a pleasure to be able to come here and talk a little bit about Marine Rescue and what we do. So, as mentioned, we do play an integral part of the search and rescue side of the marine industry. We very heavily support and are dependent on the Water Police for those taskings, and we thank them very much for that support that they lend to us. Every year our units do complete training scenarios, search and rescue exercises with the Water Police up and down the coast. So in Marine Rescue we have 44 units from Point Danger down to Eden, and that's in 6 regions. So during the year at certain times those search and rescue exercises are carried out there, and there's a lot of learnings that come from that to us, and it's great to get together with the Water Police. We also engage the local helicopter service, rescue services. This year in Sydney we had Australian Defence Force participate as well, so it certainly is far and wide. So a little bit what I want to talk about as well is certainly our communication network that we have across New South Wales. We've undertaken a commitment to improve that network since the inception of Marine Rescue. I think most of you would know where Marine Rescue has come from, so it's the culmination of the 3 previous organisations being the VRA, Coastal Patrol and Coast Guard. So some time ago it was decided that it'd be heaps easier for the public that are using the waterway to be calling one agency, and I'm sure that certainly has been the outcome. just so you can see some of the photos here of what typically our radio base would look like. All of our units, of the 44 units, they do have a radio network. There is also other stations, remote stations, that we have to certainly fill in those black spots that we had. There's 24/7 coverage of the VHF network. So when some of the radio bases actually do close down at night, that monitoring is handed over to our State Operations Centre at Terry Hills. So when you make that call, no matter where you are, you'll be talking to someone from Marine Rescue that has good knowledge of that area. And certainly also with the inception of our Marine Rescue app, it certainly makes it easier for people to log on and log off as they go up and down the coast. So can I just ask how many people do use our radio network of logging on and logging off their voyages? So there's quite a few, probably around about a third of the people here. The question that I always like to ask is, for those people that don't use it, why don't they use it? And certainly we could learn from that. If it's any particular difficulties that they may have, we'll be right. You know, we're only going a short distance. The more you're on the water, the more likelihood that there is that something could go wrong. So we try to encourage everyone to log on for every voyage. Certainly using the app, the hardest part of using the app is doing the homework at the beginning, where you have to put in your details, your personal details, your contact details, your EPIRB number, all those types of things. I guess that's some of the problems that both Paul and Cindy spoke about, having equipment aboard that's not registered to that organisation, to the I guess the response coordination centre. But certainly that's the hardest part about using our app, is the homework in the beginning. So we did undertake, around about 6 years ago, to improve our network. This is some of the propagation charts that typically we use to gauge where we have those black spots and how we can improve. We've got 33 SARCs up and down the coast. So typically any one day on a weekend there may be up to 300 Marine Rescue volunteers, and they are all volunteers, on radios and in boats ready to assist anyone that might need it. And once again, there's the app. It's simple. Download it from your app store and start using it. So this is really just the identification of the black spots, a bit of a preamble about what we did. Some of the marine network that we have, 100% of the coastline, 24 hours a day, is certainly what we're aiming to monitor, and we do. So there's also a lot of training that we do provide to members of the public. So if there's a requirement for your LROCP licence, we do that as well. Boating licences, we support that as well. There is a lot of stuff that we do, and certainly public education is one of the biggest things that we try and promote. Being safe on the water. Tell someone where you're going, how long you're going to be, when you're expected to return, and no different than the people in the Sydney to Hobart that have regular skeds. So should those people that are enjoying their trip down the coast or up the coast, just doing that general cruising. So with the recent races, the preludes, the Sydney Hobart, we've been working very closely at Terry Hills to do those skeds remotely from Terry Hills. So we're able to take control of a particular radio base, and those skeds were carried out of there. We may have 3 or 4 radios turned on up and down the coast, so we might have, certainly at the start of the race, there might be 100 nautical miles that we would cover, because the fleet is very close. As the fleet spreads out and we needed to do those skeds through CYC as well, we just turn more radios on as we go up the coast. So instead of covering 100 nautical miles, we're doing those skeds maybe up to 300 nautical miles, and then slowly we would shut down those radios behind the race. So that worked really well. I think on the first night for one of the first races, it might have been the Sydney to Southport. There was 85% of the field were covered in their skeds on the first pass, and there was probably only 3 vessels that we couldn't get in contact with, because ultimately our VHF network is good for that 30, 35 nautical miles offshore. They might have been going to Fiji or somewhere like that for Southport. They were 55, 60 nautical miles offshore, so we couldn't get in contact with those. But certainly it's a system that works really well for us. So this is once again, all the bases that we have up and down the coast, so you can see that we've got most of all of the coastline covered. We do have 2 inland bases as well. One's at Moama, and we certainly are looking after the Snowy River or Snowy Mountain system as well, with assets at Jindabyne. So this is purely from a propagation chart, what we had when Marine Rescue started using a lot of that older equipment from those existing organisations. This is based on a 1 watt handheld radio at sea level. So naturally, if you're in a yacht, you've got your aerials at the top of the mast, it's going to be a lot better. Are you using 1 watt? No, you might be using 5 watts, or you might be using 25 watts. So this is what the propagation chart's based on. So we've moved from that to this. So the red colour is where we have a lot of crossover, and there's almost I can't really say it, but almost 100% chance that you'll be heard on your first call. But as you can see, the amount of work that we've done, the amount of assistance that we've had from the New South Wales government with funding has been able, or has allowed us to put the money back into this network, so that we're listening out for any of those calls that may come from any of the boating public. As I said, we do work very, very closely with the Water Police. Quite often we'll get a call from a member of the public. Certainly if it's offshore, it's immediately notifiable to the Water Police. They may have assets in the area, they may be completing some exercise, they may be on another job in the vicinity of that assist, and we provide that information to the Water Police as soon as reasonably practicable. We have 2, 3, 4 operators in any one base, so that call comes in, so we can jointly get that message out to our crew, so they will respond to any close incidents. If police have a vessel in the area, they'll certainly go to that location as well. Sometimes we'll continue to go, sometimes they may have a particular intel and reason to go instead of us, so we work very closely with them, but rest assured somebody will be there. And these are just some of the assets that we have now. The jet skis for the coastal bars. We all know how treacherous they can be at certain parts of the year. So they've provided a huge assistance for us as well. And then we have our larger offshore vessels as well. And that's about it from me. Certainly, if there is any questions that anybody has, certainly if you are or have experienced any difficulties and do have a reason for not logging on with Marine Rescue, come and see me afterwards, and I'll try and have that chat with you and encourage you to log on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Now we come to a very important part of the evening, of the day, I'm sorry. I'm still recovering from last night. There's so much misconception about what helicopters can and can't do. So we have CHC helicopters who have worked with, from the club, helping them gain their accreditation, which they've got to do, I think, every 2 years. And so we've invited them along, and they've taken today so seriously. They've come great distances. And with no further ado, I'd like to hand over to CHC.
Fantastic, and firstly I'd like to thank John and the Cruising Yacht Club for the invitation to come and talk to you today, share your experiences, as well as tell you about our organisation and how we fit into the support network, which is Maritime Search and Rescue. Specifically, obviously, CHC is a helicopter company, and we specialise in the provision of search and rescue services to government agencies, essentially. Today, myself, I'm Peter Matinell. I'm the Technical Crewman Standards for CHC. I'll look after all our search and rescue operations, both here in Australia, but also globally. We're a global company, and this is what we do. So, got a team here, got Cameron Dixon, our Director of Operations, Craig Foggo from our Safety and Quality team, and Jake Turner, who will be talking to you shortly, is one of our air crewmen and rescue swimmers based at the Air Force Base in Williamtown in Newcastle, on that asset there. First and foremost, search and rescue is it's a commercial game, and it's a big one. As Cindy touched on, there's many search and rescue assets located throughout Australia, and indeed the world. Today we're talking on behalf of CHC. We'll be providing some information on policy, procedure, best practice. It is of what CHC thinks. It may not be the same on the day depending on the asset that you get. Okay. So with that, just quickly, CHC Helicopter, we specialise in the provision, as I said, of search and rescue assets and aeromedical assets to government agencies. In Australia, we conduct all search and rescue operations for the Australian Defence Force. So that's Army, Air Force and Navy inclusive. So we work very closely with AMSA in Canberra to provide the helicopter search and rescue assets on behalf of Defence. Looking at a bit of a global context and just something that may be of interest, we'll have a quick look at our global operations, and I've put a short video in here of an operation we did in the North Sea. Our Norwegian operation responded to a call from the Norwegian Joint Rescue Coordination Centre in March of this year to respond to a distress signal received from a cruise vessel called the Viking Sky. What unfolded next was unforeseen and never seen in search and rescue history. So I've got a short video just to capture that and paint a bit of a picture globally first. Been cruising. Anyone signing up today? obviously, you know, an extraordinary event that the systems in Norway had to be prepared for. The search and rescue system in its entirety was tested over those 2 days. And as we saw, the largest search and rescue operation ever seen at sea, or helicopter search and rescue operation. So from a context, again globally, before we come locally, from CHC perspective, as I said, we specialise in the provision of search and rescue services to government agencies. That includes the Irish Coast Guard, the UK Maritime Safety Authority, as well as the Australian Defence Forces here in Australia. So looking at our assets in Australia, principally these are on contract for the Australian Defence Force. We have aircraft at every Air Force base with an ejection seat aircraft, and also assets for the Royal Australian Navy in Nowra, and the Army in Darwin and in Tyndall in the Northern Territory. These are very unique aircraft. These are dedicated production line search and rescue assets, what we call them, and we'll talk about that shortly. As you can see, from Sydney down south, we have the coast fairly well covered, and there is a high probability in the event that you need assistance at sea, you may see a Defence Force asset being tasked by AMSA, possibly at the request of New South Wales Police supporting all other agencies. So search and rescue, helicopter search and rescue. As John sort of said earlier in the day, there is a misnomer at times that search and rescue from helicopter is always readily available. The aircraft will turn up, they'll send a rescue crewman or a paramedic down, and our problems will go away. If it was that easy, I think we'd all be in a far better place. So we're just going to talk you through the realities of helicopter search and rescue today, the challenges and the complexities that we face, really to paint a clear picture of what we can and potentially cannot do. So with that complexity I've already touched on, any helicopter rescue at sea is a very difficult and complex evolution. Detection is key. We've talked about PLBs and AMSA coordinating that effort. If we don't know where you are, we can't assist you. So beacon registration, beacon activation, understanding how the equipment works when you need it. Knowing where it is and you've got it is one thing, but knowing how to use it in the dark, in a cold, wet environment when you're under pressure is of critical importance. If we can't get to you, we can't help you. Time. Like everything, time is a precious element. Every mile from the dock is another 4 minutes on average for a fast vessel from a hospital. Exactly the same for an aircraft. When we fly offshore, every nautical mile we spend flying further offshore is less time we have on scene. So our search and rescue aircraft based at our Defence Force bases routinely will operate up to around 150 nautical miles with an hour on scene. Most of the time that pushes out. So if we go beyond that, that time on scene diminishes. So if you have a person on board that is injured in requiring medical care, if we're operating at 180 to 200 nautical miles off the coast, we have minutes on scene. That's it. So the critical care piece sort of goes in the back pocket, and we'll get to that. We need to get you to a place of safety. Okay? So time is key. The environment, okay, another big one. Not all helicopters are created equal, is what I like to say. Emergencies at sea at night for helicopters are over water are near impossible. The only assets in Australia that can conduct over water at night rescues by helicopter are those on contract to the Australian Defence Force. So when darkness falls, it becomes extremely difficult for us to carry out any winching operation over water at night. Okay, there is a fair chance you will have to wait until first light until you will get rescue or care. Okay, so we need to be clear on that. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Jake Turner. He's one of our rescue swimmers from Newcastle. We're going to run you through some of the operations and some of the equipment that we use, so it's not foreign to you. Okay, when you see it at in the dark and stormy, hopefully you never do. But let's have a look at some equipment and see how we can use it. Jake.
Thank you, Pete. So that working?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
Thank you for having me. So hopefully we don't meet, but if we do, you are going to be met by a qualified rescue crewman or swimmer down there. So the first thing I'll definitely say is follow all instructions that are given to you from the aircraft and also from the person that you meet in the circumstances. That's the big one. We're probably going to cover that off quite a bit through the slides. So search and rescue, methods of recovery. The gold standard, and sometimes medically it will dictate that we need to recover you from the vessel via a stretcher. The big one with this, it's for especially with a masted yacht, this is very difficult to achieve and comes with a lot of dangers. So we may not always be able to do it, and we may have to look at a different version of what we can do. And we do have some more gear, and as Paul said, we'll cover a lot of that in the question and answer. So the heading and deck transfer, if we can, we'd like to direct transfer our crewmen onto your vessel. The rescue helicopter will ask you to maintain a heading and speed, and we'll conduct the transfer from there. It is a slow process, we will talk you through it, and then we'll conduct it. So safety is the number one for us, that we can get home as well as bring you home. So if we can't complete that, we may have the option of, as Cindy's talked about, providing an airdroppable life raft. This provides us with a soft target behind the aircraft. So if my rescue crewman can be winched into it, and if I bump him into it, it's not going to hurt him compared to your vessel. So once again, follow all instructions from the aircraft or the rescue crewman. For us to do that, we will utilise a high line or a heave-in line. So there's 45 metres of 9mm blue water rope there with a 2.5 kilo bag on it. Now the most important thing to take away from this is do not attach this to your vessel. It's clearly written on the bag. We'll stress this when we get to there. Okay, if the stretch is not a valid option for us on the day due to the environment or the wave conditions, we may opt for a strop rescue. We've probably all seen this before. Now it's not comfortable, I will tell you that straight away, but that allows us to get you back to the helicopter to get you to medical help. So as we can see in the video, it is a slow process. You'll be there for a while, but you will be in the good hands of one of our rescue swimmers or crewmen coming down. So this option, as we saw in the previous Hobarts, this was one of the methods that we used to recover. Being that we had such mountainous waves out there, this is a snatch and grab method. By no means is it the gold standard of rescue, but it is a way of us getting you very quickly out of the water. So moving on to the next slide here, and as we see in the picture, the survivor's actually in the seated position. So the strops that we do use here, they look like a single strop, however the red part actually detaches and then goes under the legs and brings you up in the sitting position. This is a lot more comfortable, and the safety side of it is vastly increased for us. So as time permits and if the sea state permits, we will start taking more time and bring you up to the aircraft that way. So that'll be dictated on the day by the crew and also by the rescue swimmer. So once again, follow all instructions going to give it to you by the crew. So touching on the rescue equipment, the high line we've talked about, and we'll definitely go into it a lot more. Another thing you may see if we can't get communication with you is that this bag is lowered down to you, which contains a marine radio in it on Marine 16. Once this gets onto the deck, remove the radio and discard the bag. We'll be doing the same from the aircraft. The other option we've talked about, so the rescue strops, we may actually send our crewmen down with another harness if we have the time and the environment dictates that we can do this. We'll put you in a harness depending on your injuries and bring you back to the aircraft. So once again, Cindy said that we operate closely with AMSA, and we have their airdroppable life raft marine radios. So the question that I put out to all the skippers and the sailors here today, how can you help us help you? There's two really crucial ways that you can do that. Every one of us so far that's stood up here and talked about these little things. So PLBs. If you have this on you, and this is not an expensive item, this allows you to come home. Your yacht is replaceable, you're not. Can't stress that enough. So make sure it's registered, make sure you know how to use it. So secondly from there, the next little piece of kit that's great to have on, a little light. It doesn't look like much now, but with the night vision goggles that we operate in the CHC aircraft, this is magnified immensely and looks like a beacon, almost a lighthouse when we're flying out over the ocean. So another great little piece of kit to have on you. So in this image, as you can see, the aircraft is actually into wind at this stage. This allows our pilots to have a good view of the back of the vessel, and we can see the high line is on the back of the rescue swimmer down there. And it does take time to get everything ready, and we'll get you off. So we may actually ask for your crew's assistance at the time to stabilise the stretcher or stabilise the patient while we actually conduct the lift to get you clear of all obstructions on the vessel. And once again, you get to see the crew there working on the back of the boat. And once again, I can't stress, just follow all instructions given to you by the helicopter. And once again, it may not be a CHC helicopter that turns up on the day, so the gear may be slightly different, but most of the techniques are generally the same within the industry. Thanks for your time.
So just in closing, again, re-emphasise time is everything for rescue at sea, and nothing will happen quickly. The aircraft will arrive overhead. They'll get as much information from the support agencies as we possibly can, and you on board the vessel for what's happening, you know, the medical situation you have or the emergency situation you may be in. When the aircraft arrives overhead, they will hover generally off the stern of your vessel, and it will probably feel like they sit there forever, okay, not doing a lot. What they are doing is they are assessing everything on scene. They're looking at your vessel, they're assessing whether they can put a rescue crewman on the deck. They're assessing whether it's best to launch one of your rafts off the stern of the vessel, or do we deploy a raft. So lots of planning has to take place prior to the rescue actually unvolving. The aircraft turning up on scene is one piece of that, or the fixed wing turning up overhead and getting communications. So these things take time. As I said, in Australian waters, you're always going to get a rescue crewman or a paramedic down there to assist you, and they'll give directions. Okay, follow the directions as best you can. If you're not clear on something, get clarification before going on to the next step. Complexity, okay, that's key. We're here to help and we're here to support the agencies, but again, we need your support to do that. And again, critically, rescue is not always possible. We will do our very best in the conditions that you find yourselves in, and that we'll be there with you. So thanks for your time, and hopefully we can run some scenarios and answer some more questions.
Well, there we are. So that gives you a general overview of a helicopter, but as it was pointed out, all helicopters aren't equal. And we have different types of helicopters, like Westpac helicopters, very, very, very good on land rescue. But when it comes to sea, mainly you will have to get yourself wet. I think that would be the best way to put it, to be safely lifted off for both the helicopter as well as the crew person being recovered. I think at this point in time, I think it would be great to get Paul to run through a general overview and ask any questions and come up with the best possible answers for what's been. So with no further ado, and I would ask you, if you're going to talk, could you please use this microphone and we'll get it to you. Paul, thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
Do you want to use this one?
No, it's okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. So I think the best way to go about this was
to talk about a couple of scenarios. Now, I do this sometimes with the volunteers when we're conducting our training, and I think about my own scenarios. Example for you, you're 20 miles off the coast, you've been dismasted, your rigging's got caught up in your rudder, you've managed to cut away your rigging and you're now disabled in the middle of the ocean. What are you going to do? You've lost your VHF aerial off the roof, off the mast, or have smashed the aerial on your rail and stern. What are you going to do? Has anyone got any suggestion? Activate a beacon. Okay, that's a way to activate your beacon. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah. Anyone else? Handheld VHF. Satellite, everyone carrying satellite phones? Sat phones. Okay, so you need to start thinking about how are we going to communicate. That's the first thing you're going to do is communicate to someone. How are we going to communicate? So if you activate your beacon, it's going to go straight to Cindy. Cindy's going to probably, not knowing what, because she's got no communications, her next step would be to activate an aircraft for a beacon. It's standard procedure for Cindy, yes?
Again, the registration of your beacon is key here. If you put in your sat phone number in your beacon registration, I'm going to try and phone it. So turn on your sat phone,
yes.
And that might allow us to develop a slower but better plan to provide assistance to you. If you're not in any immediate danger, then we might be able to send a vessel out to assist you,
yep.
and we may not send a helicopter.
Absolutely.
If no one's injured.
So straight away, have your sat phone on. Think, oh, no VHF, I've set my beacon on. Someone might try and call me, I'll turn my sat phone on. Cindy gets the beacon activation, she rings the sat phone, she can talk to you, oh, I've dismasted, everyone okay? Everyone's fine. Okay, great, we're not going to send the helicopter. That might be the choice. We're not going to, what's the helicopter going to do? They're not going to winch 12 people off the yacht. Okay, they're limited to what they can do. So Cindy will then probably contact us at the MAC, and we'll say, well, where's the job? 30 miles up. Okay, we'll deploy a launch. We could be, we're going to send a boat. It might be another 4 or 5 hours till we get there, depending on sea conditions and so on. What's the next thing you might be thinking about? Process of what?
Flares.
Flares? Maybe not so much just yet. Okay. We might know where you are. Once you get that activation with the beacon, would you leave your beacon on? Yeah. If you've spoken to AMSA? Yeah. You have your wise to? Yeah? Okay, so you leave your beacon on. So they're constantly tracking you then, aren't they? If you've got a GPS encoded beacon, they'll track you.
That's the key here as well, the GPS encoded beacon. So the GPS in your beacon allows us to get a highly accurate location. The other locations that we get are a good ballpark for us to send a helicopter to do homing on the 121.5 analogue that is in the beacon, in all Australian beacons. But with the GPS encoded position, that will update. Now, it may not update regularly, it depends on the beacon type. Some of them update every 15 minutes, some of them only send one GPS position and that's it. So we can only track you if we've got one of those GPS beacons that updates regularly. So I don't want to set expectations unduly that it's a system that allows us to work out what the Duke is doing. It doesn't. It gives us a ballpark of an area that we can send rescue assets to.
So the other part of that is if you're asked, you're on your satellite phone, can you give us your position, please? Yeah, you're going to read out your latitude first and your longitude to the respondent, to whoever you're talking to, whether it's AMSA or to the Water Police. Please don't read out the lat and long of your cursor location. We want to know the latitude and longitude of your vessel. It happens so often. And waypoints. Okay, it happens all the time. Make sure you're reading out the correct position. So we would respond to a vessel. We will let you know how long it's going to be till it gets there. We would maintain communication with you on the satellite phone. Think about your battery power on your phone. If it's running low, we might make an arrangement to run some skids with you, okay? Every hour or so, just a contact. Turn it off. If there's an emergency, you can ring us, okay? Otherwise, we'll call you every hour to maintain a skid with you. So we turn up on scene at the police launch, and you think, oh, I think it's all over. Well, it's not all over yet, okay? We need to secure your vessel to our police boat. And the same with Marine Rescue. We will provide the tow line for you, okay? It will have an eye in the end of it. Now, the best way to tow a yacht depending on the size and the conditions, but the best way to tow it without ripping your fair leads out of the front or the bow of your boat is to run the line through the fair lead, 2 or 3 wraps around the mast step, around the base of the mast, and then run the eye back to a winch, one of your main winches on your boat. Then pull that line further forward so you can take a little bit of weight on the winch and a little bit of weight on your mast step, and then up through the fair lead on the bow. And make sure it's not rubbing on a bow spring, so it's not going to break. The worst thing that can happen is if we lose a tow at 3 o'clock in the morning because the tow line's broken, and I'll tell you the truth, our guys aren't overly vigilant about staring at you and watching us tow you for the 10 hours. It could be 20 minutes before we notice you're not even there. We're going to turn around and come back and get you. We're not going to, we don't feel the weight, with our big boats, we don't feel the weight of your yacht on the back. Unless it's, we're running a couple of 100 metres of tow line at least, 200 or 300 metres. So that's the best way to just one scenario for you, okay? Probably a more common scenario for you. Another scenario might be a medevac off your boat. Last year we had broken leg, I think it was, on one of the Hobart boats, and we went through hours and hours of communicating with the yacht. At times not being able to communicate with the yacht because they turned the satellite phone off. But we had processes in place as to how we're going to deal with that patient on board. And the initial report came through that it was quite a significant injury to, I think it was the leg or hip, was it, Cindy? I can't quite remember. But what happened was we had to, the advice on board was we're going to keep sailing, we're going to bring them into shore. No, we want a medevac now, where they weren't quite sure what to do. So we engaged the services of a doctor. And again, I'm going to throw to you, Cindy, because even in a recreational craft, we have facilities and the ability to seek medical advice.
So we have a contracted service, which we call the telemedical advice service. So before we take any action regarding medical evacuations, we consult these doctors who have experience with long-range medical assistance. They've generally had experience with an RFDS, so they know how to provide medical assistance and advice to vessels at sea. They're contracted to us on a 24-hour day basis. It's primarily for solace ships at sea. However, it is a service that's available should you feel that you do need the medical advice. But before we work on any actual evacuation, we're going to require that doctor to speak to your vessel about what to do. Obviously, if you feel that you have no communications, you have someone in a life-threatening situation and you activate any of those distress alerting devices, we're coming to look for your vessel and we will assist that person when we get on scene. But it is helpful for us to know the situation that we're dealing with, so direct communications is always key in any response. So whether it's if your VHF radio is out of range because you're a long way offshore, alarmingly, a lot of people rely on their mobile phones these days when at sea. This is problematic. So if you've got a mobile phone and a VHF and you're anywhere outside of 12 nautical miles of the coast, we're going to have trouble communicating with you and working out what's going on. So we're sending a jet or we're sending a helicopter to come and assist. They'll establish communications, the situation on board, and will determine what best course of action there is to assist you with that medical situation, whether it's providing medical advice. And again, the medical advice, we either need to be able to patch you through HF or communicate with you via a sat phone.
So the jet has communications on board which can link together?
Yes, it does. It works most times we want to use it. It doesn't always work. As with any communications, the first thing to go is the communications. So we do our best to either relay the medical advice or patch them directly through to you.
Okay, so the situation last year was the doctor in Queensland, Brisbane, spoke directly to the yacht, who had some medical practitioner on board. I'm not exactly sure of his qualifications. And the decision was made to leave the person on board the yacht because they were comfortable and bring the yacht as
fastest speed we could back to shore and met my ambulance, which we coordinated the ambulance. With the marine rescue also assisted with when they got in towards the shore, towards the wharf.
Many times it is more hazardous to try and evacuate a patient by boat or helicopter than it is to leave them aboard.
Absolutely.
If they're in a stable situation, if it's not life-threatening, it's genuinely going to be more safe for them to remain on board the vessel.
Okay. Has anyone got any scenario they want to talk about before I keep rambling? Or we want to ask any questions?
Well, there is one question I'd like to ask, Paul.
Yeah.
And in a situation where there is a major evacuation on a yacht where you have 10 crew and, or in the worst case scenario, there's a collision and there's a sinking and you've got 10 or 12 or 15 people in the water with EPIRBs, and there'd be personal EPIRBs. How does that affect the signals sent out? Because, and is there a way they can turn to, they should be getting together to say, okay, I'll activate mine, you wait?
So most of your training, when it comes to people in the water, most of your training tells you to raft up together. Keep in a big group, secure yourself, use lanyards to each other. In that case, you can activate one beacon. The trouble with multiple beacons in a very small area is there's potential, and there have been some studies on through the UK that suggest that when you're turning on tens of dozens of beacons, they signal can interfere with each other because of the proximity. So if you are rafted up together, make best use of your beacons by turning on one. Now, if, however, you're drifting off by yourself and you haven't been able to raft up, turn on your beacons. We want to be able to find you. So if you have a beacon, use it. But if you do raft up and you do have the opportunity to maximise the amount of time these things will operate, then turn on one at a time.
Yeah, so I'll back up what Cindy said. So as Cindy said earlier, when we activate a beacon, AMSA and the Rescue Coordination Centre handle that signal digitally. So the digital system can handle multiple beacon activations better than the analogue system in which aircraft home should. So we get multiple beacons in a very small area with an analogue system. The home essentially really doesn't know which way to go. So the importance of rafting up and reducing the amount of beacons to minimal will assist in homing for the aircraft on the scene.
What about personal AISs? Are they of value to you guys in this scenario?
So for the aircraft that can actually detect the AIS, certainly, but not all aircraft can pick up your AIS. It's probably better for vessels responding.
Yeah, ours are definitely.
Yeah.
We'll come into the region, we'll pick up every single AIS target that's there. Yeah, absolutely.
So the aircraft, so your aircraft don't carry?
So aircraft on with defence, we have AIS capability, and we actually identify it as an AIS target as well, as will the Challenger jets. But smaller aircraft, your Westpac rescues, they will not have that technology on board. Right.
Can I just add something to that broken leg situation that was complicated by the fact that I had a heart condition as well. So it's really important to try and establish any pre-existing medical conditions with your crew, or know as much medical history as possible so you can hand over to the person that's on the phone. That was one of the most complicated.
It was, yeah.
And that's critical as well, I think, from our experience. If you have a team meeting in any environment, be it sailing or anything else that's a public forum, not everyone will put their hand up and say, yep, I have a heart condition, I have another medical condition. A lot of those conversations have to have one-on-one, and they'll tell you things they wouldn't normally. But as a skipper of a vessel in a emergency situation, it's very important information to know to be able to hand on initially.
So the most frustrating thing for us as search and rescue responders is accuracy of information. You your phone number's up to date, your registration up to date, your boat details up to date, your crew details up to date, their shore contact details, all those are so important. They're very, very important. I'll lead into another half scenario of probably it's the monkey in the river which no one likes to think about is deceased persons on board a yacht or a man overboard. We've had a few of those of recent times up the north coast where the catamaran rolled over. We had 3 deceased people in the water, and how you respond to that. What do you do? No one likes to pull someone out of the water deceased. Our boys do it regularly, unfortunately. But depending on your scenario, if you're 30 miles off the coast and you're the only one that's going to be there, it might be something that you need to do. And you need to be able to figure out how you're going to do that. If something does happen to someone's cracked on the back of the head by the boom, they go over the side and they're face down in the water for a period of time. Of course, you're going to try and retrieve them from the water, get them back on board your vessel, treat as first aid as best you can, and then commence if you're required to do CPR. Look, there is a period of time, it might take 2 or 3 hours for a response to get there from a water asset or from an aircraft, depending on where you are. It may be a case that you need to make that call and say, well, clearly this person is no longer alive. Okay, and how do you manage that? You mark on your GPS where this incident occurred. You think about the time of day it is, the weather conditions, where the crew were on the deck of the boat, who was on the deck of the boat, who witnessed the actual incident. You need to just process a couple of those things because they're all the questions you're going to get asked when you get back to shore or when an emergency service arrives to assist you. Okay. Unfortunately, it just happens, and we're not going to leave them in the water. We need to make that retrieval happen. Okay.
We can also get medical advice to you if you are performing CPR on someone. A doctor will assist you with those assessments as to whether there's any need to continue that CPR, and a medical professional will give you the advice as to what to do and when to stop.
One very important thing that you must do if you're seeking medical advice and a doctor, you're patched through and a doctor answers, is you must, prior to doing that, know exactly what's in the medical kit so you can support the advice that's to be given. And one of the most important things you must do then, if you, 2 of you, if you can do it, is enter it in your logbook. The advice, the name of the doctor, the advice given, etc. Because if there's anything goes astray and there's a repercussion from it, a coroner will take that as evidence that that was the advice given. So that is a most important thing when you're getting advice at sea from a medical situation.
Can I just ask, Cindy, just on the communication thing, there's probably quite a few of us here who registered our EPIRBs with you quite some time ago. Things have changed. Is there any way we can go online and look to see what we've got registered with you and then do updates?
Yes, you can do that. So there is in the amsa.gov.au webpage, there's a link to the beacon registration. You pop in your HEX ID and you can see what information has been registered. You should be reviewing these things every 2 years at a minimum. You can actually update them every voyage that you have. You can go in and update in your comments section everything related to the voyage that you're about to undertake, including numbers of people on board. There can never be too much information in a beacon registration for my use.
The only thing it will allow you to do is it won't allow you to transfer ownership of the beacon to on the county online. You can do it that way.
Yeah.
Submission.
Yeah, 1-800-406-406 if you have any difficulties.
Could the club put that on their email system or email out to the members? That information that you're saying, do they put that on for us so we have that where we can actually go to what link it is so we can register our EPIRB?
I can't speak for the club, but I'm sure they could. Yeah, we've got nodding in the back. Yes, they can.
Thank you.
Is there any other scenarios anyone wants to ask about? Or?
Thanks. So we've got Australian registered yacht, Australian registered EPIRB, currently based in Europe, and eventually sailing back. So a scenario for us would be we set off our EPIRB, we're in Europe or wherever, and you receive that call. So can you just explain what happens from there and how we get the support when we're in a different time zone, different continent, different languages? Yeah.
Sure. So as I already said, we operate 24 hours a day, so time zones are irrelevant for me. They feel pretty bad at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they're irrelevant. It doesn't actually matter what time of the day or night. In Australia, your beacon gets activated. Someone in the JRCC will be responding to it. With your registration information, if I know that your beacon, so we've got the first alert that we might get is an unlocated alert. So the satellite system has detected the beacon but not quite got enough data immediately to give me a location. Doesn't matter, I will still get it. I can then start making phone calls because your beacon is registered to whatever emergency points of contact that you have. Now, this is another point with emergency points of contact. Having an elderly relative who's got no information about the boat, what you might be doing, they do not make a good contact for me to try and get information from. Your contacts need to be people who are either aware of your boat, what equipment it has on board, and what you are doing, or people who know where to go to get that information for me. So, with an unlocated alert, we'll start actioning it. It doesn't actually matter that I don't know where you are. Soon after, and with the new MEOSAR satellites, we're getting locations very, very quickly. I will get your location in the Mediterranean. Now, depending on which search and rescue area you're in, they may come to me immediately requesting registration information. If they don't, I will forward them the information about your vessel and what I know about your vessel and how many people might be on board, and communications. So if I have, again, knowledge that you have VHF, that you have 27 meg, that you have sat phone, I will send all of that information to the country who's actually going to be responding to your distress alert. So that's how the system works globally. So it doesn't matter.
And do you continue to follow that up? Because there was an incident in, I don't think it was with an Australian registered yacht, but in Panama not that long ago, where an EPIRB was activated after a pirate attack, and nobody came. Nobody followed up on that. The local authorities or the local search and rescue did not come to the aid of that vessel.
There's not a lot I can do outside of the Australian area. Yeah. Unfortunately, it is a risk that is taken by yachts who go into areas where there's known piracy. I cannot force another country to take action on behalf of an Australian citizen. I can provide them the information. I can relay, if I've received advice that you're under a piracy attack, I can actually send that information to the piracy authorities, but I can't oblige, just like I can't oblige a merchant vessel to respond, I can't oblige another search and rescue region to do more because I don't feel it's adequate. So we can provide information, we can provide updates as we get them. There's not a lot else that we can do if you're not in Australia.
New South Wales are very flush with assets compared to the other states in Australia. With rotary aircraft, fixed wing, we have the 50 marine rescue bases, all with their own vessels out to 30 miles. You've got 8 water police. You even go to the northwest WA, you're waiting on a 2-day response. Here, you're worried about getting 2 hours, or even 20 minutes.
Or even if you're halfway between Australia and New Zealand, you're waiting potentially
That's right.
A couple of days for a merchant vessel to divert to get to your location.
So we responded to a job 400 miles off the coast of the Nemesis, and it's in big seas, 7-8 metre seas. It's a day trip plus. It's a good 36 hours to get there. Yeah. So again, and some countries don't have near the SAR system quality as that Australia has. Australia definitely is a leader in the search and rescue with the system that they have in place. As the same with the United States are very similar, but I mean, other countries are as well, so I won't exclude everyone, but there are those that don't even have one.
If you're in Europe, there's probably 15 helicopters that can get to you very, very quickly. In Australia, if you're within 100 miles of the coast, generally we can task helicopters, but anything outside of 100 miles, with the exception of the defence assets, we're very limited in our capability. Northwest Shelf, some of the mining helicopters obviously have longer range abilities, but for most of the Australian coast, with a helicopter response, we're limited to no more than 100 miles, and sometimes it's much less, depending on weather.
You've got to remember that, as has been said, that not all the helicopter that may be dispatched to your assistance will be, as we've shown here, it might be a small helicopter, and the odds are you will have to jump in the water and be picked up behind the helicopter. I think that is correct.
Never jump in the water until they tell you to jump in the water. Do not ever jump in the water. Specifically instructed.
And that has been proven up and down the coast. There's a lot of films taken of that. So when you're calling for assistance, and especially, you must recall that either you're going to maybe have to use your own life raft, or if you're fortunate and get one of these ones, that's wonderful. But otherwise, good luck.
And sorry, you laugh, but people have jumped off perfectly serviceable vessels to swim to merchant vessels that were trying to get alongside to provide assistance, and it's not ended well.
And to back that up, part of the system that AMSA developed works with your, I'm not a yacht person, but your racing harnesses, and you attach yourself to hard points on the vessel. When we dispatch you a life raft or a tender from behind the vessel, you'll tie that line off to your vessel and the life raft at the other end. You'll then attach your harness to the guide line that's in the water. So if we are jumping overboard, we're still attached essentially either to the raft or your vessel, so you're not going to drift away. We also can deliver straps that play that same purpose of the harness to ensure that you are still secured until a rescue crewman or a boat or another asset gets their hands on you. So that's important.
Is there any more information anybody requires?
Yeah, I think in that scenario it would be really helpful maybe for skippers to understand roles and responsibilities for, in a scenario like a head injury or something like that where there's recovery required from a life raft. That would be quite helpful.
Yep. Yeah, and that's something that's very difficult, and that's that complexity. So medical injury, and we can't transfer off the vessel, which is highly probable. So how do we transfer a person from your vessel into a small tender onto another vessel, be it a police vessel or a marine rescue vessel? That's difficult in its own right, let alone trying to get someone with an injury from your vessel into a raft or a tender. Yeah, that's
a lot of commercial boats, or all commercial boats these days have what's called a safety management system. So, and look, it's something that you can adapt to your own recreational craft if you wish to think about those scenarios and how you're going to deal with them. And if you're in a race like the Sydney Hobart, sit down with your crew for half an hour and talk through those scenarios about this is what we're going to do if this happens, this is what we're going to do if this happens, this is our plan if this happens. Just so they're all okay, we all understand what we're going to do. It's just another little thing that you can do to make it a bit safer.
Is that about covered for everybody, or is there anything else you'd like to know?
Just got a quick question on personal sort of laser lights. A lot of us are now carrying them, and the use of them, as I'm told, is that they're great for long distance activation if we need to signal a chopper or a aircraft.
You talk about the flares?
No, an actual like a laser light torch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So it's actually like a so it's a red laser beam.
Yeah, it's okay, a beam, or there are rescue laser flares.
No, this is an actual beam.
A beam, so
yeah.
a single point of the wall,
single point, and then the further away it is, the longer the wider the beam is.
Oh, so it fans out?
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, so that's a rescue flare.
Correct.
Okay, right. So, and they have to be used in a very specific way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a recognised device, safety device, so we don't encourage using one.
Yeah.
And if it's the wrong type, you can actually blind the pilots.
That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah. So it has to, It's a generally, let's go with no for lasers as a general rule, but there are specific ones for maritime distress alerting. But as a general rule, lasers are known.
There are rescue lasers on the market. They're not recognised as a distress device. From my experience, seeing people activate them, they're very difficult to detect by day. By night, they are more prevalent. And if the aircraft or even the vessel has a night vision capability, they are easily detectable. But again, they have to be used in a very specific way as well. So there's lots of points of failure along that road, I think.
How do we find out how to use them? Where do we get hold of that information?
The manufacturer's instructions. Yeah, but they are, from the ones I've seen, they're very specific on angles and all sorts of things, which make them quite complex to use in a complex, sitting in a raft at night, trying to figure out how to use your rescue laser versus the flare.
You better open one of those strobes that the guy showed you earlier. I think.
Yeah, something that you turn on and you know it's going to work.
Well, I think that might cover everything, and I'd very sincerely like to thank the presenters for coming, especially from such a long way, and some of them came and expressed the thanks of the club, and I'm quite sure of the people here, for your information. Thank you very much. I'd strongly advise you to come up and have a look at this safety gear, because hopefully you'll never have to use it, but if ever you do, it will be there for you, and may you have a safe and happy Christmas, and may the winds favour you wherever you are.